Today I'm here with a review of the HTC Inspire 4G. And this is one of the premier Android smartphones available on AT&T. So let me give you guys my full review, tell you what I like, what I didn't like, all that kind of good stuff. So to begin with, let's talk a little bit about the data. So if I just pull up a speed test and give you guys a little demo of the data speeds. Of course, this is a 4G enabled phone on the AT&T HSPA Plus network. Now, I do want to preface this by saying that AT&T in my area is not stellar. So I was not able to get a lot of the speeds that a lot of other reviewers have. So do take this with a grain of salt. Typically, people do get better than this. You can see here I had a lot of really bad results where I really didn't have any reception at all. But right here, about my best result was 1500 kilobits down and 200 up. Now, again, typically people have gotten a lot more. I've seen a lot of other people who have better AT&T servers get somewhere in the neighborhood of 4, 5, and 6,000 kilobits down, and anywhere from 5 to 1500 kilobits up. So certainly not horrible speeds. Still not going to be on par with something like Verizon 4G, but definitely something to keep in mind. If you have good AT&T service in your area, you'll get some pretty decent speeds. As far as phone calls go, I didn't really have any major complaints. I could hear people just fine. They said they could hear me just fine as well. And overall, I really didn't have any major issues with dropped calls either, which is definitely pretty good considering that, like I said, I live in a pretty poor area of AT&T service. So when it did find a signal, it did tend to latch onto it pretty strongly. Now, briefly, let me get a little bit into the specs of the phone. So, of course, it does have a 1 GHz Snapdragon processor, and this is the second generation variety. So, compared to something like an Evo 4G or a Nexus 1, it's going to be considerably faster. It's going to be, of course, the second generation. It also is paired up with 768 megabytes of RAM and an 8 GB micro SD card, which, of course, does come with the phone. So overall, all this together, I found that it's really quite a snappy experience with the Inspire 4G. Now, while it's not a dual-core phone, it's not going to be blisteringly fast or whatever. I really didn't have any major issues. You know, it's able to play games just fine. Of course, you can just do the cool little things with Sense, which I'll get a little bit into Sense in a minute. But overall, didn't really have any major issues, especially in the browser. And I do want to show you guys the browser here. The browser is probably my favorite feature of the phone. This is an absolutely outstanding browser. Certainly the best Android browser I've ever used. As you guys can see here, here's actually a embedded YouTube video, which of course runs in Flash. Since this is an Android 2.2 phone, it does come with Adobe Flash Player pre-installed. So in fact, let me just play a video for you guys and show you. So, just a really brief clip there. I can show you guys that really quickly here. You can actually open up various tabs. So in fact, let me open up something else here. So as you guys can see here, open up multiple tabs. You just pinch out. You can scroll between them and select them. Nice little bit of eye candy. But anyway, the browser works really quite nicely. Pinch to zoom, and I'll show you guys, even with Flash on the page. And then as you guys can see, it's a fairly long, well, not really that bad, but pinch to zoom, very, very clear. One thing I did notice was a little bit odd was the text reflowing. Now, this is something more general to Android phones, but the text reflowing is a bit wonky on a lot of websites. It does work fairly well, I'd say for 90% of websites, but every once in a while you go somewhere and it kind of messes it up. But not a big deal, and I definitely really did enjoy the browser. Now, moving on from that, let me talk a little bit about the software on this. Of course, this does run, like I said, Android 2.2 Froyo with HTC Sense pre-installed. So what Sense is, and I'm not going to get into it really in depth, that's a little bit outside the scope of this video, but Sense is a general thing. Of course, it adds this down here, and it redid most, if not all, of the applications in the phone. So what I'll give you guys is a quick demo of this. Oops, don't want to do that. I'll add a little widget here. Of course, Android, one of the great things about Android is that it does support widgets. So we can just open up, I don't know, let's just grab a music. And so as you guys can see here, if we had some music playing, I don't want to play it due to copyright, we could just play it right from there. We have other widgets where if I want to, search Google, I could absolutely do that. And we also do have the famous HTC Sense clock, which I really do love. In fact, if I lock the phone and unlock it, you'll see that it has full screen weather animations. So as you can see there, kind of a cool little animation. It does that varying on what the weather is in your location. Now, as far as the pre-installed apps go, generally there's some pretty decent stuff, but on the other hand, there's some other kind of junk. So as you guys can see here, there are quite a few apps. Some of these I have pre-installed, but most of them I haven't. So for example, it comes with Asphalt 5, so if you'd like to play a game, of course it comes with that. One really pretty cool thing is it comes with a blocked caller, so you can block callers, which is pretty cool. Another thing I liked, and I'll just get into this really briefly, is the car panel. What this allows you to do is, because of course the nice large display, if you want to use this as something like a dedicated GPS, well, maybe not dedicated, but if you want to use it as GPS in your car, just open up the car panel, and it's a nice big UI, so if you're driving or whatever, you can really easily get to what you're doing without, you know, wrecking. So you can get to, you know, your navigation, your voice search, all that kind of good stuff right from inside the app. Moving on, I don't want to go through all of these. Pretty much since his HTC has gone through pretty much all the apps and has reskinned, tweaked, and whatnot. And overall, I actually really don't have any major issues with it. It really looks really quite nice. So yeah, that's about it. Of course, it does have a Wi-Fi hotspot feature, so you can support up to 5 Wi-Fi devices. So basically the way it works really simply is, with the phone, you're connected to 3G or 4G, and what you do is you open up the Wi-Fi hotspot, and let's say I'm here with my Nintendo DS, and I can play online or a laptop or whatever using the Wi-Fi hotspot. So that works really quite nicely. The camera on the Inspire 4G is really not bad at all. So of course it does have an 8 megapixel rear facing camera along with dual LED flash. And what I found was that, especially if you're outside, it takes really nice pictures. So as you guys can see here, I'll show a few pictures up on screen right now. These are all taken totally untouched from the Inspire 4G. In fact, what I'll do is give you guys a brief demo of the camera app. So just open this up. The camera app on HTC Sense looks really quite nice. So there's really not a whole lot I can show you guys here, but along here we can switch between video as well as photos. So you can support all these resolutions all the way up from 176 by 144, which I have no idea. I guess if you're going to send it via MMS, but you can go ahead and shoot all the way up to 720p. And then if I switch over to the photos here, you find that you have a few different things. You can do some image, oops, I don't know what I did there. You can do some image adjustments, so if you want to manually do the exposure and whatnot, the white balance, and you also do the resolution all the way up to, of course, the full 8 megapixel of the camera. Now there are a couple of other things you can do. The flash, you can do all kinds of stuff. One cool thing I liked is the various different things you can do as far as the filters go. Again, I can't really show you because I've just got a desk here. There's not really anything particularly exciting, but as you guys can see in the pictures, it really does look quite nice. So no real issues with the camera. Both the video and the pictures are decent. Not the best I've ever used, but certainly not half bad for a camera phone. Now let me give you a overview around the phone, show you guys some of the cool things and some of the things I don't like. One thing I absolutely love is the 4.3-inch display. Now the resolution is a WVGA, which of course is 480 by 800. It's not the highest resolution phone on the market, it's certainly not, but especially if you're coming from something like an iPhone or whatever, you'll definitely appreciate the nice 4.3-inch display. It's really large, allows you to get a lot of the internet and whatnot on it. Although on the flip side of it, the screen is not the most responsive I've ever used. So this is especially apparent in internet browsing. If you're viewing like a full desktop site and there's a really tiny link, well, a lot of times the phone has a little bit of an issue trying to register exactly what you're clicking on. Now, I found this is not really something unique to the Inspire. A lot of phones, well, indeed, I would say the vast majority of phones do have problems with the really small links, which of course, in normal day-to-day use, you'll almost never have that issue, but of course it is something I do want to mention. Up top here, you'll find the speaker grill. There's also an LED, which is really quite nice. It lights up if you have a notification, or if you're charging, or your battery's low, which is really nice. Along the bottom here, you'll find your row of Android capacitive touch buttons. They work really quite nicely. They have a little bit of haptic feedback, which you guys might be able to hear on the mic. Every time you click on them, and they do light up depending on how bright the situation is. So very, very cool. No complaints whatsoever there. Up top, you'll find the sleep-wake button. It's a little bit recessed, not my favorite button in the world, but certainly no real issues getting to it. Same goes for the volume rocker right here. Of course, I already showed you guys the camera and the dual LED flash. This is the speakerphone. The speakerphone is a bit tinny, something you definitely expect with pretty much any phone. I mean, it also is a little bit of an odd place. So of course, when you're holding the phone like this, odds are you can really easily cover that up. But again, not the biggest deal in the world. But what I do want to say is that I really do like the hardware in general. So as you guys can see here, the screen takes up a huge amount of the real estate of the phone, which is something I appreciate. You've got a nice 4.3-inch display, but you don't really have to have a phone that's going to be enormous. There's not a whole lot of bezel whatsoever, especially up top, which is really quite impressive. So yeah, the phone it's a decent size. It's definitely going to be fairly big, but not half bad at all. And the whole thing is made out of, I believe, aluminum. Don't quote me on that, but it's certainly some sort of metal. which gives it a fantastic feel. I mean, it's not particularly a thick phone. It's not the thinnest either, but very, very, very solid phone. It's got a little bit of a weight to it, but overall, I can't say enough about the build quality and the feel of the phone. HTC absolutely nailed it. And as you can see here, there are a couple of little strips of, well, I guess not strips, but little bits of soft touch plastic. This is where you get the battery out, and I do want to say the battery is it just takes forever to get out. It's really, really hard to get it out of there. It's just something you have to live with. Hopefully you won't have to be changing the battery very often. Down here you can pull the bottom piece off and get at your micro SD card as well as your SIM card. Now, one downside to the phone is certainly the battery life. Now it does have a 1230 milliamp hour battery, but with a 4.3 inch display, 4G, it definitely does burn through it pretty quickly. So in my experience, I found that I was able to get through a full day of battery, but I had to be fairly easy. It's definitely light to moderate use. So if you're a heavy user, if you're always checking your email, your Twitter, your Facebook, browsing the web, playing games, I mean, if you're a really heavy user, you will probably not be able to get through a full day of usage with the Inspire 4G, which is definitely a bit of a disappointment. However, considering the price point, I will let that one slide. You just do need to be a little bit cautious of the battery life. Don't, you won't be able to run a full day of playing games and all that kind of stuff non-stop. So guys, that's about it for my review of the HTC Inspire 4G. There's a lot to like about this phone. Now currently it does retail for $100 on a 2-year contract with AT&T, although definitely be sure to hit up. I will have a link in the description. The prices are literally always changing, so between the time I make this review and you watch it, just be sure to hit that link and it'll let you know exactly what the price is right now. But anyway, overall, I really have no issues recommending this phone. While it's not perfect, AT&T 4G is not the best. I'm not really a huge fan of it. But if you're buying a phone on AT&T anyway, the Inspire is a great way to go, and especially due to the fact that it's got a great build, and it really does work well. Pretty much the only major downside is the fact that the battery life is less than stellar, and it does not have a dual-core processor, which is not the biggest deal in the world, but it is something you definitely do want to keep in mind as you're looking forward. But again, for the $100 price point, there's nothing that can touch this. So if you're looking for a really, really solid phone on the AT&T network, I have no issues recommending the HTC Inspire 4G.